All right. So today we are reading Order again. It's episode 6. And we're getting to the really interesting stuff. All right, I'm not going to lose any time. I'm just going to get right into it. Last part, they made it to Vallesta, and Daniel had already tried to escape. He did not succeed, of course, and now they're more heavily guarded. Let's see. So now they're making it home, and by the end of this, they are finishing up the plotting of the planning of the wedding. Okay, so let's get started, shall we? We're doing chapters 17 through 19. All right. Chapter 17, Making It Home, Katerina. The guys that volunteered in Vallesta told me that they wanted to continue helping us deliver the prisoners to my brother's castle, so I agreed to let them. It was a nice change from earlier when it was just me and Dmitri. Isn't this nice? I asked my fiance. We were sitting inside the wagon this time because more men had joined the ones that protected us, with Elizabeth and the young man that had just become a guard a month before Elizabeth was born. I didn't even know his name because we hadn't had any true time to get to know each other. He spent most of his time unconscious from the beatings he had gotten from Daniel. Very, he replied. He smiled at me, watching as I bottle-fed Elizabeth. I'm glad we can relax now and not worry. Dmitri reached out and placed his hand on my knee. Me too, I agreed. We are moving faster now than we were before. I think that's because we don't have to keep our attention divided between where we're going and the prisoners that we are bringing with us. Dmitri nodded, and we continued quietly talking until the young guard with us woke up. Dmitri looked over at him and said, Hi, you feeling better? The young guard had been seen by healers in Vallesta, so he had been patched up a bit. Well, I don't have a headache anymore, said the young man. He was a little older than Dmitri in age. From the beatings, he had a few whip marks that wrapped around his neck and up his cheeks. They would scar, even with the treatment he had gotten. That's good, I said. You were pretty out of it, and I haven't really gotten to know you before your capture, so I'm sorry to say that I don't know your name. I looked at him with embarrassment. I'm sorry I never took the time to get to know you. It's okay. I completely understand. We were still dealing with Eduardo's escape and the wedding planning. He smiled at me. My name is Gareth. By the way, how's the wedding planning going? I smiled at Dmitri. It's been going well. I can't say too much, but it was going well before Elizabeth was taken. Dmitri had his bachelor party a few months early because we didn't want to take away from the last month of Natalia's pregnancy or the first few months of Elizabeth's life. However, due to this kidnapping, we might move up our wedding. Dmitri and I shared a look of longing and hope. Gareth chuckled. bringing us out of our thoughts. I can see why, he said. We blushed a little, and Gareth smiled. So, how have things been since I was captured alongside Princess Elizabeth? I frowned. I only stayed for a little bit afterwards, so Dmitri will have to fill you in. I stared down at Elizabeth as she slept. My brother's actions towards myself was a little off-putting. Dmitri sighed, looking first at me and then at Gareth. King Frederick closed down the castle, except for the guards that he sent out to get word on you two. He called for a council for planning how to get you two back, but he still didn't want us to leave. He snapped at Katerina when she tried to suggest some ideas for getting you two back, and that night she disappeared from the castle. King Frederick? Gareth asked, confused. Yes, said Dmitri. He took a deep breath, looking at me again. King Frederick received a package a few days later. Inside of the package was Elizabeth's baby dress, covered in blood. He was devastated, thinking that his daughter was murdered. That was probably my blood, Gareth said, blanching. They used rags to clean up my wounds. I can't imagine what the king and queen were going through. Natalia and Lonnie were inconsolable. They mourned heavily, but Frederick was an angry mess. He snapped at anyone that disturbed him. He demanded answers from the men that he sent out to find you two. Dmitri took another deep breath. He was a broken man until he was told that Elizabeth was alive. I shivered at the darkness that my brother had gone through. Do you think that he's better now? My voice came out a little timid. I didn't want my brother to still be upset with me when I arrived back home. I think so, Dmitri said wearily. I hope so anyway. He slid over until he was sitting beside me and wrapped his arm around my shoulders. Maybe. Maybe he'll apologize about his actions. Maybe. Gareth cleared his throat. I believe that he's sorry for his actions towards you. I don't believe that he would continue to act harsh towards you, even if you did disappear on him without permission. I giggled slightly at the wry grin that Gareth had on his face. Perhaps, I said. Soon, January would come to an end, and February would be here in no time. I sighed as I thought about Elizabeth's original birthday, the one she was supposed to be born on, that was coming up soon. The rest of that day went by pretty fast. By that night, we were able to stop and have the prisoners tied to the wagon, so that they wouldn't get lost, but so that they could lay down and sleep. The ones that had protected us today were taking turns sleeping while the others guarded us and the prisoners. Dmitri, Gareth, Elizabeth, and I were all sleeping in the wagon. The next morning, we started off again. Today's journey seemed to go by much faster than yesterday. Before too long, we were traveling through the village below my family's castle. We were soon recognized, since Dmitri, Elizabeth, and I were on the seat of the wagon, and our prisoners spat on as we passed through the crowd. I turned to Dmitri. This is going to be so weird. He nodded. Yes, it will. We rode up the hill to the castle. By the time we made it to the top of the hill, my family was already outside waiting for us. Dmitri looked at my hand that I had at some point put on his arm. I don't remember putting it on his arm, but apparently my nervousness was showing through. Dmitri drove the wagon up to the castle and we got down. He led the way over to my family: King Frederick, Queen Natalia. Katerina and I have traveled all over Nanari to find Princess Elizabeth, and we have arrived to hand her back to her parents. He spoke so formally that my mother's lips twitched in hidden laughter. "Brother," I said wearily. When he looked at me, I hunched slightly over Elizabeth and Rory. "Bring her here, Katerina Agate Pearson." My brother's voice was gruff, but I missed the tears in his eyes. I slowly walked over to where he stood, and I was suddenly pulled into his arms as he hugged both me and Elizabeth. My eyes widened, and then I started crying softly into his chest as we cuddled with Elizabeth. "I'm sorry," I sobbed. "I'm sorry too," Frederick replied as he squeezed me tighter, but not tight enough to hurt Elizabeth. "I'm sorry that I snapped at you and treated you like you were worthless." He kissed my forehead. "You are not worthless. You are braver than some men that I know, and you are my support. You make me a better person. It's a good thing that you're back today. We can get the family, and maybe a few guests together for a small party." "Party?" I asked. Frederick chuckled. "Did you lose track of the days? It's your 17th birthday." I blinked in surprise. "Huh, so it is." Natalia laughed and walked over to take Elizabeth from me. Elizabeth snuffled in her sleep before opening her eyes to look at her mother. Apparently, she instinctively recognized her mother because she grabbed Natalia's dress and snuggled in. Frederick let me go so he could hold his wife and child. He glanced up at the prisoners who were exhausted and the men guarding them. "Please, come in. My men will put them in their cells. You are welcome to join in on our celebration and stay the night." "We thank you, Your Majesty," said the men from Valletta. They grinned and cheered. The Peterson family guards came over to grab the 7 prisoners. A healer came outside to take Gareth to the healing halls. I watched as everything happened. We ate dinner, and then we were able to have a small birthday celebration. Julie was there while we partied, and I gave her a big hug. "How have you been, Julie?" "I've not been well," she admitted. And my confused look, Julie continued. "My husband died last week. It was peaceful, though. I woke up one morning and he was gone." I teared up. "I am so sorry," I said, reaching out to hug her again. "Let's not be sad today," she said, patting my back. "It's your 17th birthday." "You're right. It's my birthday," I smiled as I looked around the ballroom. My family was already getting the room ready for tomorrow's ceremony when Dmitri and I officially returned Elizabeth to her parents. Chapter 18: A Ceremony and a Trial. Finally, Frederick. Katerina's birthday party went by quickly, unfortunately, because of the late hour. The entire family, family guards, and Julie all gave Katerina gifts to celebrate her 17th year. We then went to bed in preparation of today. Today, Dmitri and Katerina would officially present Elizabeth as the kidnapped and returned princess. I got up and walked over to the nursery where Elizabeth lay sleeping. She was a beautiful little one with her mother's soft features and my dark hair. I ran a finger over her little fist, and she grasped it tightly. Natalia and I got Elizabeth ready for the ceremony. She was dressed in a cute little pink dress. The dress flowed down her little body and over her tiny feet. We walked downstairs to the antechamber of the throne room. where Katerina and Dmitri were waiting. My sister was wearing a form-fitting royal blue dress that flowed behind her in a small train, after having flared out a bit at the hips. Her hair was a curly mess on top of her head, with a small tiara shining in front. Dmitri wore a nice navy blue suit and gold tie. His house colors, I remembered. I cleared my throat, getting their attention, and asked, "Do you remember what you have to do?" "We remember," they said together. I nodded and handed Elizabeth over to her aunt. "We'll be inside. Wait until everyone's inside, and I'll call for you." "Okay, brother," Katerina said in a huff. She watched me leave with Natalia. I could feel her eyes on my back. I stepped into the throne room with Natalia following me. We sat on our thrones as the guests filled the room. We waited until everyone was seated, with the young ones in a corner of the room to keep them occupied. Then I raised my voice to speak. "Thank you for coming on such short notice. Yesterday, my sister came back home with a special surprise for our family. I ask her now to come forward and present the surprise." Then I turned my head. "Katerina and Dmitri, please come in." The door to the antechamber opened. Katerina and Dmitri stepped into the throne room, and people gasped at the bundle in Katerina's arms. They were staring at the three in the back of the throne room as Katerina and Dmitri were walking down the aisle towards the two thrones. Katerina and Dmitri stopped in front of me. "Please state for us all what you have brought to us today," I said in a formal way. Katerina spoke clearly. "I, Katerina Agate Peterson, and Prince Dmitri Romanova have found and brought back the stolen Princess Elizabeth Clarice Peterson to her royal parents, Frederick and Natalia Peterson." Murmurs started up again. I started to speak, which quieted the murmurs, and said, "We thank you, Princess Katerina and Prince Dmitri, for bringing our daughter home." Katerina walked over to Natalia and handed Elizabeth over. I smiled before I finished the ceremony. "And thanks for your services, I grant you a portion of land just east of here. You will be able to get there in just a day. I will have some men build you a manor there, and you can have your own village around it. That land is yours to command in all ways. This is a huge responsibility for you, Katerina." I stepped towards her and whispered to them both, "This land is yours, mostly, because I can't officially give it to Dmitri as well." They nodded, and I hugged the young couple. Pulling back, I said, "Then let's head to the ballroom to eat and dance in celebration." Everyone cheered as we gathered the young ones before heading down the hall. "Welcome to the ballroom," I said grandly as I spread my arms wide. People laughed, which is what I wanted. The kiddos went to the pen/play area, while the adults either grabbed a drink or started dancing. My wife was holding Elizabeth and rocking her. I watched as Dmitri swung Katerina around in a complicated dance. Katerina was smiling and laughing, holding on to Dmitri when he brought her back into his arms. It was good for her. It wasn't long before the day of the trial arrived, and the Pope with it. I had cleared out the benches from the throne room after the ceremony of Elizabeth's return. I didn't want the prisoners to feel comfortable while on trial. I would have the benches brought back afterward. "Frederick, are you ready for the trial?" Katerina asked me as she walked in. "Yes," I replied. I turned to her. "Are you?" She scoffed. I've been ready for their trial. She smiled afterwards and said, the Pope is on his way downstairs now. We should be able to start soon. Okay. Get everyone into place? I asked. Sure, she replied. She kissed my cheek and left to go get the rest of our family and Dmitri. When she returned with the others, we all got into our places. Natalia and I had our thrones, and everyone else had their shorter throne seats on either side of us. The Pope was given a chair to the side of the room so that he could see how I did this. I would have to complete this trial as the king and not as a father, to show everyone that I was going to treat everyone fairly. Inside, I might want to really hurt the prisoners, but I would have to stay calm. I motioned to the guards to bring in the first prisoner. The guard left and came back with Daniel Marquis Jr. It was time to get to the bottom of this. Daniel Marquis Jr., I said as I sat there watching him stand before me in chains. You are charged with threatening a monarch, murder of the same monarch, threatening to murder a royal heiress, kidnapping an heiress, and plotting against the Peterson family. In all fairness of ruling, I will ask you to explain your side. How do you plead? Not guilty, he said, possibly thinking that I had no proof on the charges. His face twisted into a sneer as he looked my family members over. I glanced at the Pope as if to say, well, what did I say he would do? Then I turned to the servant. Please bring the proof in. The servant reached to the side and grabbed some papers. He brought the papers over to me. The stack of papers consisted of the threatening letters that Daniel Jr. sent to my father. There were also the letters that were in Eduardo's room when Eduardo was first captured. I set those letters aside. Right now, I had his grandfather to attend to. I read the letters out loud, and the witnesses that were there gasped. Any explanation? Daniel Marquis Jr. glared at me. He deserved it. What he did in the past was inexcusable. I had to do something to get back at him. He tried to attack me, but the guard with him stopped his forward movement. Your father was a murderer. People were confused, I could tell, but I responded to the prisoner. I don't agree with what he did, but his father was an abusive man. He beat his wife, and my father took care of it. However, my father is not on trial here. You are. My voice was calm, but my heart raced with anger. I felt Natalia place her hand on mine, and I took a deep breath. Daniel Marquis Jr., one last chance. Do you have anything to say about the charge of threatening to cut my baby sister out of my mother, or the charge of kidnapping my daughter? Daniel Jr. narrowed his eyes. Cutting the babe out of that woman would have been a great revenge against Julius. Then I thought of getting revenge on that sister of yours for thwarting my plans. My new plan was to kidnap your daughter and raise her to one day kill all of you when she gets your trust. He chuckled in amusement when we all gasped in horror. You would kill off our entire family over one person? I asked in shock. He nodded with an evil smirk. I cleared my throat and gave the sentence. Daniel Marquis Jr., for the crimes you have committed against the Peterson royal family, you are hereby sentenced to 10 years in a workers' camp. Daniel Marquis Jr. was led away as he spit in fury. The rest of the prisoners were sentenced in the same way. Eduardo had seemed to really understand now that he had done something wrong and deserved to be punished. The maid cried as she pleaded guilty. She knew that what the men were doing was wrong, and she had gone along with it anyway. The 4 men that had guarded Daniel Marquis Jr. and Eduardo were resigned to their punishments. They knew that if they had been tried in Inari, they would probably be put to death. The last prisoner was walked out of the throne room and towards the workers' camp. I looked at the witnesses and said, "Thank you for witnessing the trial. You may leave now." I stood and walked over to the Pope. "Your Holiness, how did I do? Do you think I handled it fairly?" My voice was quiet so that I wasn't heard by the witnesses that were leaving the room. I was worried about what the Pope would say. "I thought that you handled yourself well, my king. When he goaded you, you kept your head. Now, did you really mean that your father killed his own father?" The Pope looked over his glasses at me. "Unfortunately, it's true. My father purposefully kept my grandfather distracted so that his horse would balk at jumping a 3-foot wide gorge, and your grandfather was thrown into the gorge." I sighed and looked up at the Pope. He told us before Caterina went on that first journey. At the end, he regretted his decision to kill his father. The Pope nodded solemnly in understanding. I'm sure he found peace at the end. He patted my shoulder and said, "I'll head to my room here. I'm due for a vacation, so thank you for offering me a room here for up to a month," he teased me. I didn't think that my sister and Dmitri would wait much longer before they got married. The wedding. Final preparations. Caterina. I looked up at the invitations that I was writing when I saw a figure in the doorway. "Hi, Dmitri. What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," he said with a smile. "I was just wondering if you would like to move up the wedding for 2 weeks from now." I thought about it for a moment. "You're lucky that I haven't put a date on the invitations yet." He looked confused for a second before his smile returned. "Let's give them about 2 weeks and 3 days, just to be safe and giving them extra time." I wrote a quick note and offered it to Dmitri. "Does this sound like something that we should send by dove to your parents?" Dmitri read the note and nodded. "I think that this works. It's quick, to the point, and lets them have enough time to pack before they travel 2 weeks to get here." Good. I couldn't wait to get married to this man. "Now, please help me finish these invitations, and then I have a surprise for you." "A surprise?" he asked. "Yes. And if we hurry and get this done right, then we can spend more time on your surprise." My smile widened, and I went back to writing out the wedding invitations as I heard Dmitri walk over to sit across from me at the desk and pick up a card to write out an invitation. He sighed at the number of invitations that still needed to be filled out and sent. I giggled at his exasperation. We worked for about 2 hours, and then I pulled him away from the room. "Please send out the invitations that you find on the desk," I said to a maid as we walked through the castle. She curtsied. I motioned for the note that Dmitri had still. When he handed it to me, I gave it to our butler. "Please use one of the doves to send this to Dmitri's family." "Yes, Your Highness." He bowed, took the note, and left. I drove Dmitri outside and down to the village below. "I have something for you, Dmitri," I said. I pulled him down to the bakery where Julie was waiting for us. "Hello, Julie. Is it ready?" Yes, Your Highness, Julie said, laughing. She handed over a bag with a box inside. Have fun, you two. Her eyes didn't show her happiness because she was still in mourning, but her smile lit up the bakery. You will, I said, placing a hand on hers. Please try to enjoy life again. You know that Mr. Baker would not want you to die of loneliness. We will always be here to help you whenever you need help. I hugged her. She hugged me back. I know, sweet thing. It's still hard, though. The pain will never go away, but it will lessen. I pulled away from her. Come on, Dimitri. We have one more stop to make. What stop is that? Dimitri asked, curiosity all over his face. You'll see. I smiled mischievously. We walked over to the blacksmith and I ran in to get a small bundle. I came back out to see Dimitri sitting on the edge of the fountain in the center of the village. I walked over to him and gave him both the bag and the bundle. Happy late birthday. His head snapped up at me. You didn't want to celebrate your birthday because we had just learned that Eduardo had escaped, and then we had too much going on. So, here's your birthday celebration. He swallowed hard. Thank you, Katerina. You are very welcome, I replied. I smiled as he went to unwrap the bundle first. He unwrapped the bundle to find a set of fine daggers with his family crest on each one. When did you see your family crest? It's on your sword hilt, I said dryly. Oh. He blushed slightly. Then he set them aside gently and reached for the bag from the bakery. Inside was a box, and in the box was a beautiful one-tier cake. The cake was a chocolate cake with a light chocolate cream cheese frosting on it. The "Happy Birthday, Dimitri" on it was piped in a royal blue, and there were golden yellow and royal blue flowers surrounding the words. He was touched, I could see, and he looked up with a smile. Thank you, Katerina, for the cake and the daggers. This means so much to me. This is a wonderful birthday celebration because you are here. I smiled with tears in my eyes. I'm glad I can make it wonderful. We sat there and ate cake while we talked about anything and everything. We were content to just sit there all day, but a man rode into town right then. Is Prince Dimitri at the castle? A man's voice called. We both turned to the voice before standing up. Dimitri recognized the man as his family's messenger. Leon, over here. When Leon reached us, Dimitri asked, Is everything okay with my family? Everything is fine, my prince, but your family wanted you back with them. They wanted to know if you were ever coming home. I laughed and sat back down. Dimitri mock glared at me. Katerina, it's not funny. He turned back to Leon. We just sent out invitations to our wedding, so everyone could be gathering in about 2 weeks. We also sent a message by dove to reach my parents quicker, so that they had time to pack before traveling. You're welcome to stay for the 2 weeks. Right, Rena? Yes, of course, I said after getting my laughter under control. Let's head back to my castle and see if my brother will set up rooms for everyone. We walked back to the castle and saw my sister-in-law with Elizabeth. She was showing the baby the grounds and even the horses. Elizabeth was looking at everything with huge blue eyes. Hello, sister. Where is my brother, Frederick? He's in his study, dear, said Natalia. She smiled at my companions, but her eyes held curiosity over Leon's presence. Thank you, Natalia. I curtsied slightly and then bowed before we walked inside. I led the way to Frederick's study and knocked on the door. "Come in," said a voice from inside. I opened the door. "Hello, Kink brother," I said, curtsying. Dmitri smirked at me before he and Leon bowed to my brother. Frederick frowned slightly. "What's wrong, Katerina?" "We have a guest for 2 weeks, and the guests for the wedding should be here in 2 weeks." I smiled. "You really couldn't wait, could you?" Frederick asked in amusement. "No," I said happily, as I skipped over to give him a hug. "Can we please have rooms ready for our current guest and the ones on their way?" "Of course," he said, pulling me into his lap. I squeaked in surprise before he turned to my companions. "Dmitri, please have a maid show your friend to a bedroom, and have the other maids ready for many guests." "Yes, sir, King Frederick." Dmitri bowed again, and he led Leon away, shutting the door. Frederick and I looked at each other. He asked, "So, you and that boy are getting married in 2 weeks?" I nodded. We didn't want to wait months anymore. Not to mention that you never know what will happen. And if one of us dies, at least we will have been married. "That's a little morbid, sister." Frederick pulled me closer, hugging me tightly. "Sorry," I said, "but it's the truth. You never know what will happen in life. Just think of Julie and Mr. Baker." I buried my face in Frederick's neck. He rubbed my back as he spoke. "However, that could be many years from now. You have many years ahead of you. Of that I am sure." He squeezed me gently. Then he asked me, "Is there anything else that is worrying you?" "I'm worried that something will go wrong soon." I lifted my head. "I don't know what it could be, but it could be really soon." He said. "What about you do How about you do a tarot reading?" I pulled the deck out of the hidden pocket of my dress. "Good idea." At his surprised look, I smiled. "I keep the deck on me now. It's easier." I shuffled the deck as I thought about what the bad feeling could be about. I pulled the Ten of Swords in the reversed position. Something is ending. On the surface, everything seems fine, but someone is moving against us. My face paled slightly. I then drew the next card, the Nine of Wands. Strength and determination. We will have to draw on our courage and integrity to face this trouble. The next card was the Nine of Cups. Something is out of the ordinary. It could be a time of celebration, but not necessarily our celebration. I glanced at Frederick in confusion. The next card was the Justice card in the reverse. Chaos, but the need to find balance in life. We need to use logic and reason to find the solution to the problem. The Chariot showed up next in reverse. A state of struggle ending in triumph? I was confused as to what this problem could be, and the cards were worrying me. Then the Magician showed itself. Great energy and potential. New opportunities are available. But the last card, the hidden message of the reading, was the Seven of Swords. This card is a message of something happening in the background. Someone is planning something in secret. We must be cautious of this person. He or she is doing something that we should be wary of. I looked at the 7 cards on the desk behind me. 7-card reading, a powerful number. "What's going to happen?" I asked Frederick as I looked at him. "I don't know, but it's something big," he replied, looking at the cards as well. I could tell that he was also worried. As I gathered up the cards, I thought out loud, someone is planning something sinister and secret. Whoever it is, they were plotting against us in some way, and it would cause a bit of chaos around us. We need to be wary, but logical and brave also. Let's just hope it comes after the wedding. I stood up, put the cards in my secret pocket, and started to leave the room. I didn't know that I was worrying my oldest brother. Life was certainly getting stranger lately. Now we just had to wait and see what life brings us. Alright, so that is the end of today's reading. And Monday, let's see, looking at my list. Okay, so Monday we will have a kind of sexy scene, and if you don't like reading that in a kind of older young adult book, then skip Monday. But that is what needs to happen. If you don't like reading that, so it's nothing big, just a hint of it. But yeah. Alright, so Monday is also the day that we read about the wedding, and we find out something that pertains to the cards that Katerina just read. So a little bit of forewarning, foreshadowing of things to come. Alright, so I hope you enjoyed this reading today, and I shall see you Monday for our next one. Alright, bye-bye.